Thank you very much, Bob. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here today, all of you, as part of the Logicali CIO Summit 2022. The world has rapidly shifted to a digital-first scenario, but at the same time, some external forces are threatening global organization digital plans. My name is Andrea Siviero. I'm part of the IDC analyst team, and I'm very happy to be here today with my colleague Dave Clemente, and we would like to share with you some of those insights that are really leading the digital-first motion, and also understanding what are those key priorities for you as a CIO as to navigate this wind of change in the digital-first world. What we are going to do here, we are going to explain a bit better what we mean with the digital-first world, what it means to succeed in that, and also share with you 4 key areas that we think should be cannot really missed in your CIO agenda. So 4 topics that will also characterize today's CIO Summit agenda. And then also we like to wrap up with some action on how to bring this on field in your daily activity. But before we go deep into that, let us explain how the digital-first world is composed of. So basically we have 3 parties all connected each other. You have consumer that spend more and more time online, and they really fuel this digital-first world in terms of online shopping, remote connection with the family, for example, but even streaming and leisure activity online. And then government that really recognize the need to accelerate on their digital transformation and also to provide citizens with better and digitally enabled services. And finally, enterprises. We saw how the pandemic in the last 2 years has been really a catalyst for a fast acceleration of digital plans across organization, and really we saw more and more new digital business model across organization. So all these 3 components are interplayed between these and make the digital first fabric that is characterized in the overall world. Basically, digital transformation spending is really accelerating a record growth. We are expecting to reach $1.8 trillion spending in terms of worldwide digital transformation spending this year. And we are really reaching this tipping point, moving from this digital transformation area and closing the current digital ROI gap to this digital business area, where the focus is really on running a sustainable digital business, pivoting around 6 key dimensions in terms of leadership organization, financial, brand reputation, customer ecosystem, workforce and operation. And one key dimension and variable that is going to characterize the shift to the new digital first business area is really also that share of revenue that in your organization are going to come through digital channels and also digital services and products. So all this, as we mentioned, is impacted by a very fragile and volatile market out there. There are these external forces that are in terms of headwind, for example, that are really blowing over global organizations and are challenging them in terms of their business plan, but also their digital roadmap. We are talking about, for example, pandemic management, supply chain shortage, and also the recent very bad war between Russia and Ukraine. At the same time, there are also some tailwinds that are actually some external forces that are putting some energy and fostering business and digital plan. This in terms of, as we see, of those digital first 3 parties, but also, for example, think about how this new creating ecosystem across different industries that we are seeing and how the role that digital is playing around that. At the same time, we also recognize that there are some crosswind that are external forces that are posing some question mark for organization in order to react and to adapt to this kind of scenario in terms of sustainability, pressure, digital sovereignty, cybersecurity. And it's the ability of the organization, also of you as a CIO, to turn those crosswind into tailwind for your organization. So with that in mind, let's think now, let's take a step back and let's look at what are the key organization priority. And for that, let's look at the CEO opinion on that. Let me hand over to my colleague David for that one.
Thanks very much, Andrea. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. As we think about the implications of those winds of change Andrea was just talking about, we'll continue to set the scene with some spending priorities for 2022. So what you can see here is some results from IDC's Global CEO Survey conducted earlier this year. And you can see that there's some overlap in the prioritization of business area spending between the regions. In other words, some of the same business areas appear in multiple regions. However, the rankings of these business areas are different. As you can see, the number one area is different in each region. And this could present interesting challenges for CIOs, particularly in multinational organizations, as you and your CEO may have spending priorities that vary based on the region. So our advice for CIOs, is that it's good news in some ways that you're in a position to be a key enabler in all these areas of business change. At some level, every business is now a data business, and your access to data across the organization gives you a high-level perspective that few others have. So we'll look a little bit deeper at CEO expectations of the CIO role in the next slide. So here, this is from the same survey, and it offers insight into CEO expectations for CIOs, both now and over the next 2 years. So if we start at the top with the future, a top future expectation for CIOs is orchestration of digital transformation. And this is pretty closely aligned with the priority below that, leading digital transformation to deliver new revenue streams. So the top expectation today are risk management and cost reduction. And it seems quite reasonable that these are both in the top positions, given the current geopolitical and financial uncertainties around the globe. So these expectations, both for today and tomorrow, pose some real challenges for you as CIOs. For example, if we think back to the winds of change that Andrea talked about a couple of minutes ago, we can be reasonably confident that many of the headwinds that will continue to blow between now and 2024, particularly skill shortage, supply chain constraints, and inflationary pressure. So what can CIOs do to meet and exceed these expectations? Well, your role allows you to make more data, more actionable, more rapidly, and on a greater scale than almost all of your other C-suite colleagues. This means that CIOs, you've got something particularly valuable to offer to the business, whether it's managing the risk of today or developing new data-driven revenue streams for the future. The CIO will remain an essential part of the business. And it's this future perspective that we're going to focus on throughout this presentation. You'll see in the next slide 4 priorities that are steering CIO agendas. And our objective here is to offer you an overview of these 4 priorities and to set the scene for sessions later in the day in this Logicalis CIO Summit. Those sessions will dive into these topics in more detail. So let's get started with the first one, future of digital infrastructure and connectivity. And here we have a brief stat around spending. And by 2025, business decision makers will be deeply involved in making or overseeing strategic digital infrastructure choices. And many, perhaps most of these choices will be implemented, carried out through service consumption. OpEx is a key topic of conversation in many of our surveys. And OpEx permits flexible consumption and allows business teams to more clearly identify infrastructure cost implications of individual programs or projects. So as usage increases, you as CIOs can factor these implications into your ROI models with higher and higher degrees of precision. Now, a lot of the connectivity we're talking about here will be enabled by cloud services. And this takes us to the next slide. As we think about the future of digital infrastructure and connectivity, it's clear that a significant area of growth is in cloud services. Now, that might seem obvious, but we see that this growth happening specifically in using the cloud to scale up workload capacity. So if we look at the projection on the left, as we sit here in the middle of 2022, it's probably reasonable to estimate that we're now at about 35% in terms of cloud platforms as a proportion of the worldwide software market. Now, this growth is good news for you as CIOs. There's a lot of data that comes along with these investments, including better logging and visibility, increased granularity of monitoring and control that you will gain as workloads are moved into the cloud. There are also some challenges as well. If we look to the right, we see 2 infrastructure architecture priorities for CIOs. These are priorities that survey respondents said were critical to achieving their business goals. The top point is around consistency across infrastructure. And this links back to the survey results I talked to earlier about orchestration being at the top of the CIO agenda in 2 years. The second point is around agility across infrastructure. So here we've got 2 potentially competing priorities. On the one hand, implementing a consistent operating model, but two, doing this across a hybrid cloud environment. So these architecture and workloads exist to serve someone, but for whom and what purpose? Let's turn to the next slide to have a look at that. Here we've got some examples around connectedness and what it means to the enterprise, along with some goals underpinning what's expected to be a leap forward in the next generation of connectedness, 5G. So as we look across here, I know a lot of the items on the left resonate with me. If we think over the past 2 years, digital interactions from anywhere, ease of engagement, seamless data flows. It wasn't always like that, and perhaps it hasn't been like that always for many of you, but certainly we've seen progress over the last 2 years. Now, in some ways, this high level of progress is quite a good thing, but also presents an interesting challenge for CIOs in keeping pace with customer expectations related to connectedness. There's been a lot of experimentation and innovation over the past couple of years, customer and employee connectedness. This has raised expectations that this pace of progress should become business as usual. So our advice for CIOs then, how can you prepare for the future of digital infrastructure and connectivity? On the right, we have a key takeaway. Prioritizing business value and linking to business outcomes in all key investment discussions and plans. It sounds, perhaps to some of you, somewhat obvious, but it's hard to do consistently. And if this can be done consistently, and also in collaboration with your C-suite colleagues, then it will allow some significant steps forward for you as CEOs, making more convincing cases for future investment. And with that, I'll hand over to Andrea as we look to the next key priority for CIOs.
Thank you very much, Dave. Number 2 is future work. We all very familiar how in the last 2 years, we saw that the traditional meaning and concept of work has been completely disrupted. And really, we saw that the priority was really about working on workplace, digital investment, also to enable this remote everywhere scenario that we have all to live. But also, more and more the focus in terms of future work, digital investment, really be about employee experience. So that is what is going to take center stage in the next few years. And really what it means, so it means working on the right tool, digital tool to enable employees with the right working tool, but at the same time, it also means working on specific skills, on the existing digital skills gap that is really hampering global organization digital execution. So this means enabling skills all across the organization, different business units, and also the department to react to new type of emerging themes like data science, for example, artificial intelligence, design thinking. But also it also means to foster a digital mindset and culture at the leadership level across the full C-suite leaderboard. And this is what Bayer is doing, as you can see from this quote. So in terms of investment related to future work, so for sure, it's not just about workspace related. So it means in office, for office facilities, for example, or at home in terms of investment. That was the key priority in the past year. But more and more, it's going really to be about workforce augmentation. That will lead the growth in terms of spending for future work. And what it means, those are all those technology enabling new type of, a new level of automation and also support for employees in their, for example, repetitive or dangerous task, daily task. That means like in use case like augmented maintenance, for example, or robot using shop floor automation, and also the overall automation of operation. So these are the key type of technology doing that. But it's also about work culture. And this means those digital platform and investment to really foster this better employee experience and engagement together with some dedicated skills development program. So this is what will characterize the worldwide future of work spending. And what it means for you as a CIO, it means, so have these 3 pillars as part of your future of work strategy, so workspace, workforce automation, work culture. But at the same time, you need to collaborate that with the CHRO as your key partner in crime here to really identify the needs of the employee and also to make sure that there is a full organization deployment and adoption of this technology across the different technology and business units. So this is our future of work recommendation for you as CIOs today. Now, time to move to our recommendation number 3 and topic for today, which is really about security. Back to you, Dave.
My favorite topic. Thanks, Andrea. So we have consistently over the years, we in IDC have seen risk management and specifically cybersecurity creep up higher and higher on the agenda of the C-suite. What you're seeing here on this opening slide is just a confirmation of some of this. So you remember from an earlier slide, risk management, cybersecurity was the top business spending area in North America for 2022. I would argue that's not likely to go out of the top 3 anytime in the next 4 to 5 years, possibly longer. So extending this risk management to cloud services is a top priority for CIOs. And cyber insurance is a growing area that offers potentially new opportunities for transferring specific kinds of cyber risks. So impacts from an incident or such as ransomware is one of those examples that's sometimes covered. So the business benefits of integrated risk management include things like improved governance on workload migration, better visibility on cross-border data sharing, and more effective security monitoring, reporting, and incident management. So all organizations would benefit from better risk management around cybersecurity. And there are plenty of security challenges to face, as we'll see on the next slide. So what we see here, a number of megatrends, topics that have repeatedly come up as a high priority for respondents in our surveys and interviews and conversations. So some of these are positive, some of these are less positive, and we'll canter through them here. And in the later session of the day, no doubt you'll dive into them in a little bit more detail. So the first one is transformation, and in particular, the death of the perimeter. What do we mean by that? Over the past 2 years, it's become increasingly hard to precisely identify where all of the devices and physical assets are at any given point in time, because most of them have been outside of the office and outside of the classic network perimeter. So that's been a real challenge. That's been somewhat compounded by a growing scarcity of qualified cybersecurity professionals. By one estimate that we produced recently, about 10.5 million additional experts will be needed over the next 5 years at a global level. Now, this is not going to be spread evenly, and there are some regions and some countries and some industries that will need more support than others. We've also seen sophisticated actors, lots of talk of constantly growing sophistication in cybersecurity. We've seen some particular sophistication over the past 2 to 3 years, with ransomware becoming increasingly targeted and effective as attackers figure out who to target for the maximum payout. So there's a professionalization on their side as well that we're seeing. There's also a proliferation of security tool sets. This certainly offers more choice to CIOs and security teams as they have more opportunities and more niche tool sets to use for specific security needs. We also see a lot of vendors looking to offer more integrated platform solutions. And this is something that ties in well with a lot of the cloud discussions that we're having with CIOs. Certainly, there's also growing compliance and regulatory requirements, many of which will be familiar to you as CIOs and which you're navigating with various parts of your organization. There's changing buyer expectations. Your expectations are changing, and vendors are adapting. And we're seeing some changes in particular areas that are quite interesting. Cyber insurance is one of those. Ultimately, this boils down to trust, trying to build trust with customers, with partners, with employees. And there's a lot here for any CIO to think about. So what actions can you take that will give you additional leverage? We'd encourage CIOs to work closely with your legal teams to identify how existing cybersecurity policies may have changed, for example, during renewal. The cyber insurance market's quite young and changing, and buyers will often get to renewal time and realize the policies have changed materially. For example, with directors and officers or general liabilities policies having new exclusions that exclude certain kinds of impact from a cybersecurity incident. So it's not just about what's being excluded, but also what's being added. And many cloud providers are collaborating with security providers to offer new integrated protection that's recognized by insurance providers. And this can help to reduce premiums and offer additional assurance to you as CIOs. So with there, I'll pause and hand back to Andrea.
Thanks, Dave. Last but not least, sustainability. I think it's clear that there is an urgency for all of us to accelerate in our action to contrast climate change and also foster a greener and better world. And technology will have a key role in facilitating this sustainability-oriented action. And also you, as a CIO, will have a key role in your organization, not only with your daily action and activity, but also you will be enabler, really, a key enabler for the full company on the company ESG goals. So that's the future of sustainability, that's the topic. And there are different types of signs that clarify how also investor, employees, and also company leader recognize more and more the impact of ESG. And eyes related to ESG are also on technology. And why that? First of all, because technology for company, they are one of the key sources of consumption. So there is a focus on reduce this type of consumption, so have a greener technology, first of all. But then it's also about using technology to support specific ESG-oriented action and initiative to turn to a more efficient companies, for example, and also to reduce the overall consumption and impact on climate, on the environment for the organization. But also, at the same time, there will be another key aspect here, which is really about the role that technology will have in tracking specific ESG performance and improvement that across the organization. As you can see, there are some clear challenges out there, and these are mainly in terms of the leadership role and also the connection between the different business units in working on a unified ESG vision for the company. But also, as you can see, there is a clear need to collect data and not just to extract insight to be better, but also to track the performance and how the ESG goals of the company are met or not. So that's also one of the key roles of technology there. But as you see, this is sustainability in general is not a one business unit or IT department only affair. It actually across all type of business units, all the different component of a company. And so that's why it's so important also for you to connect with other business unit leads in this kind of activity, but also work with your technology provider to identify those ESG areas, but not just to identify, but also to track them, and in order to be aware of how your ESG journey is going, and also to be able to amplify that externally, and so on, provide insight and also ideas for potential your peers in your industry on how to be better. So this was our key recommendation for you as CIOs here on Future of Sustainability. Now, we went through all the 4 key areas that you are going also to discuss later today. So about infrastructure connectivity, it's about future work, it's about Dave was explaining security and sustainability. But now let's take a step back and think what we think are those concrete 4 actions that we recommend you to bring out of this presentation and also to test tomorrow if you're not doing that already in your daily activity with the rest of your team. So the first one, you remember Dave was saying that you need to prioritize outcome. That's the starting point. Start from concrete business value and outcome that the company need to achieve, and then link the specific technology behind that, how technology can support achieving those specific outcomes. Number 2, we mentioned hybrid when we were talking about future work, this hybrid scenario. But hybrid is also in terms of your future infrastructure. So you need to be able to be ready for this hybrid scenario, both in terms of future work, but also in terms of technology, which means support software-defined hybrid environment, but also work on your different type of migration strategy and hybrid and multi-cloud approaches. Multi-cloud approaches not just in terms of provider, but also in terms of multi-location and multi-geographies in order to be future shock-proof in terms of also a geopolitical shock that could happen. The third one is really, so they explain how it's important to enable this concept of trust, which is not just about making your company safer, but also enable this trust concept and level of trust with your partners, stakeholders, supplier, and all across the full value chain. And it means investing in cybersecurity technology, but also data management and protection solution. And finally, you remember we mentioned in each of those areas how it's important for you, to work with your business unit counterpart. And for example, sustainability was a clear example of how it's important to connect with the rest of the leadership board, because they are becoming also tech savvy. So you can talk about technology with them nowadays. And so this is our concrete action. Bring them in your digital conversation. Make sure that you have two, for example, business unit colleagues, but also experiment with mixed team between digital and business role within your team. So create those kind of specific digital and business task force working on some key priority and business challenge focus on outcome related one. With that, we want to really thank you for having us here today and the time you dedicated to us. David and myself are very happy to be part of this summit. And now we would like to hand over back to Bob for the rest of today's discussion. Thank you.